So I begged them to give me a job. I was relentless, and so finally they brought me in, sat me down. The head attorney sat me down and showed me all these old black and white crime scene gory photos, and he said, "Can you handle that?" Yeah, and he goes, "Okay, we'll give you a job." So that was my first intro into the legal field, and it was exciting. I saw a lot of things no one should ever probably see in their life. A lot of crime scene photos, autopsy photos, a lot of gruesome things. So I got to really see, a different side that I hadn't been exposed to in the legal field and in terms of taking classes. If I had an idea, something I wanted to explore or commit myself to in terms of an area of study, I would go beg someone to give me a job in it. So I could get ground level experience, but at the same time, I could set my sights on the job that someone had that had already gone through school and they'd been working on their career. That job that I was working towards, I wanted a PUD job that allowed me to get my foot in the door and watch them.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Terri Jordan. Terri is the founder and CEO of Wise Webs, a collection of business growth strategists specializing in marketing and technology solutions, as well as the president and partner of High Performance Marketing Boot Camps, helping senior executives conquer major sales and marketing pain points through hands-on, highly participative, action-oriented sessions. In her career, Terri has started a dozen companies, starting as an entrepreneur at age 16 with her own photography business. You can learn more about Terri at wisewebs.com, and you spell that Wizewebz, and at highperformancemarketingbootcamps.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Terri.
Good morning, Terri. Welcome to the Corporate Couch.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to talk to you. Look at your career, and it's just fascinating, kind of the different, I'll say, the twists and turns and the different things. And obviously you've founded many different companies. So yeah, this very exciting. So I'm excited to dig into it. But let's start with a fun question. So
all right, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's go. It's Friday here in Kansas City, beautiful fall day. Even people that know you fairly well, Terri, what one thing would surprise them about you?
You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but kind of the twists and turns that I've taken. I guess I kind of pride myself on being kind of an even-keeled, mild-mannered person. I mean, my business partner may say otherwise, but I've been through a thing or two, and I think that that's helped me in my career. As I've gotten older, I don't have to show that. I don't have to wear that on my sleeve. I don't have as much to prove as I did when I was younger. And so I think when people look at where you are in your career, especially if you've had any kind of a taste of leveling out or any kind of success, they just assume that you woke up one day and that's what it was like. It has not been easy for me at all, and so it's been putting one foot in front of the other, kind of a career path, as I'm sure we'll probably get a little bit into, but yeah, I think it hasn't been an easy road for me to get where I've been, and I think I've probably got a lot of twists and turns in my career that I think a lot of people probably don't know, and so I think you kind of wear that as a little bit of a badge of honor. Sure. Internally. It kind of keeps you going when times get tough. You think, gosh, I can get through anything if I can get through that thing I went through, and
Right.
you kind of use that to lean on. So I'd say I think people look at me and I have that goody two shoes exterior. I'm not always goody two shoes, but I've learned to kind of use it to my advantage. And I think that's probably, I think people kind of judge you and they look at you and they think one thing, and I
Yeah.
think there might be a little bit more than people realize once they get to know me, probably.
Yeah, no, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things what I love about the podcast and meeting great leaders and talking to great leaders like yourself is you're absolutely right. You know, there you look at different people and there's this shining example of success, but they don't know, all the shit they went through, in
Right.
their younger life or early in their career or whatever. So yeah, I think that's part of everyone's journey.
Mhm.
This is the corporate couch, and not that it's a therapy session, but I always like people's, how they grew up and what did they love doing as a child, as a kid. What was kind of your love?
Yeah. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to go to Duke. That's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to study virology. So I was fascinated. When I was younger, the Ryan White story was really big, the AIDS epidemic, all of that was going on. And I remember watching the movie that was based on his life. And I just remember feeling awful for him and thinking, maybe I could do something to help, when I get older, for people that are suffering. And I always liked, math and science. And so, I always thought that that was my career path, was that I was gonna be a doctor and I wanted to help people, mainly because I wanted the career, or maybe the time that I used, dedicating my time to a career, kind of committing myself. I really wanted to make sure that I focused myself in an area where I could make a difference. That was really important to me. I didn't quite know how, and I figured it would be in that area. But as you get a little older, things kind of change. We moved around a little bit. We lived in North Carolina, where Duke is, and so I always just assumed that was going to be my path. And we moved around a little bit, wound up in Kansas City, which I'm grateful for. And things just change. I still felt like I needed to do something. I wanted to make some kind of an impact. And I one of my biggest fears in life, as I was graduating high school and thinking about college, was that I was so afraid that I was going to commit myself to a particular field and then I'd be stuck. I was definitely afraid of being bored in my career. And I think part of that was, I paid attention throughout my dad's career, and my mom's a teacher, and my dad was a businessman. He was, branch manager, for some different organizations, head of sales for some different organizations. So my business acumen began at the dinner table. And so I paid attention, I listened. And so a lot of those dots very early on got connected for me. And so I never would have in a million years thought that I would go into business or even become an entrepreneur. But I think that foundation was laid at a very early age. Even though I didn't become an entrepreneur. I mean, yeah, I started my first company when I was 16. Okay, I was a photographer and I took pictures and got paid for it. But
Terri
that's
Jordan photography at
that's
16.
right.
I
That's
love it.
right. That's right. But I didn't see that as like the path that I was going to go down. It was a something I did. I didn't really see it as a career path. But then as my time in high school ended and I'm going into college, I decided to go to Johnson County Community College and start taking some just general courses to get those out of the way, because I really had no idea what I wanted to do. Even though I had a desire, in the medical industry, I started taking things like criminology. I started taking, all the science I could possibly take, and I always had a fascination with why people did the things that they do. Like that, which was in the criminology class, really sparked that. And so then I started thinking about law. There's a justice and a right and wrong, and I was drawn to that. And so I wanted to work in the prosecutor's office. So I called them up and I said, "Hey, want to know if you have any openings. I'm looking for some experience. And they said, we don't have any openings, but you need to go work for this criminal defense attorney. And I said, no, 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 it's not the side I want to be on. I want to be on this side. And they said, trust me, go get a job over there because you're going to learn a ton. Learn the other side. If you want to be over here, you got to learn the other side too. So I begged them to give me a job. I was relentless. And so finally they brought me in, sat me down, the head attorney sat me down and showed me all these old black and white crime scene gory photos. And he said, can you handle that? Yeah. And he goes, okay, you've been real persistent. We'll give you a job. So that was my first intro into the legal field. And it was exciting. I saw a lot of things no one should ever probably see in their life. A lot of crime scene photos, autopsy photos, witnessing or, through the discovery, just a lot of gruesome things. So I got to really see, a different side that I hadn't been exposed to in the legal field and in terms of taking classes. And so, one thing that really helped me was if I had an idea, something I wanted to explore or commit myself to in terms of an area of study, I would go beg someone to give me a job in it. So I could get ground level experience, but at the same time, I could set my sights on the job that someone had, that had already gone through school and they'd been working on their career. That job that I was working towards, I wanted a PUD job that allowed me to get my foot in the door and watch them, because I wanted to know if it was going to be worth my time and effort to commit myself in that direction. Again, because I'm deathly afraid of limiting my life by picking an area of focus and ruling all these others out, because, to become an expert at that age, I felt I was going to have to turn my back on all these other things and focus in this one direction. And that was a big commitment, which I was willing to do and happily would do it. But I wanted to make sure I was making the right one. And so that worked really well. I got to see, I worked there for a couple of years. I got to help a couple different attorneys prepare for their trials. So I prepared trial notebooks. I had a tremendous amount of responsibility that they placed on me, which I very much appreciated. And so I got a lot of experience in the criminal world, decided that wasn't the path I wanted to go, but I had experience in the legal field. So then I set out and got another legal job in intellectual property. Vastly different. Intellectual property is so different from criminal law. So I did foreign and domestic patent research, tried to figure out for a specific client that was filing a lot of different patents, they wanted to corner the market in a particular area. And so I did a lot of research to figure out where there might be opportunities for them to make mechanical refinements in what it was they did, and then file patents again to continue to corner the market. And so I gained a lot of, I gained a lot of knowledge there in another different area of law. Did that for a few years, and then I left and went to labor law. And by then I said, okay, I know for sure I definitely don't want to go to law school. I don't want to be in the legal field. Now what? And so, but I kept working my way up. At this point, I'm a paralegal and I'm good at it. I found out I'm really good at making other people successful. I am a good little secretary, but I wanted more for my life. I wanted to be more in control of myself. And I realized by looking at my peers, I was self-motivated. Nobody had to stand over me and tell me to do my job. I found fulfillment in doing a good job. I'm not motivated by money, but I am motivated by doing a good job. And I learned that about myself. And so, whenever I was done with the legal field, I left that, and I had a friend that had a retail store. And so I helped him for a little while, kind of in the interim, doing inventory and things like that, trying to figure out what is it do I want to do. And so around that time, I decided, okay, I originally wanted to go into the medical field. And so I decided to go back to school and study molecular biology. I was taking genetics and things like that at KU. I hated the labs, but I loved the lectures. And I really enjoyed that. And so I thought, I'm not quite sure where this path's going to take me, but I'm studying what interests me. And that was something that I learned was even in some of the other jobs that I didn't even mention, if I had an interest in it, I would go get a job in it, because I had to make money. Might as well do something that I enjoy. And so, so here I am at KU Edwards campus. I'm also taking some classes again at Johnson County Community College. So here I am, a non-traditional student. And I did go to Washburn, and I took classes when I was in the legal field, and again, kind of decided that wasn't the path I wanted to take. But so here I am at KU Edwards campus taking classes. I love it. I'm thinking I probably want to do cancer research, and as luck would have it, I ended up getting borderline ovarian cancer myself. And so I had to drop out of those classes. And I'm kind of laid up for about 30 days, trying to find out whether or not I'm going to have chemo after I have surgery. And, I just thought, I'm not quite sure what I want to do with my life. And about, I would say maybe a month or two before I ended up finding out that I was sick, I hopped on a plane to Reno. My dad was living out there, and I had just found out that I had all of these food sensitivities. And how I found out was in my study groups. This is kind of strange, but in my study groups, all of my peers are getting A's, maybe a B. And here I am getting C's, D's, and I'm not retaining the information. They're going, "What's wrong with you?" And I went, "I don't know." They're like, "You know this stuff." And I said, "I don't know, but I can't remember anything." And it's really starting to freak me out. So I knew something in my body was wrong. I just didn't quite know what. And so as I'm going through all this testing, a friend of mine just said, "Hey, you need to get tested for food allergies and food sensitivities." And I'm like, "It's not food." It kind of was, but it kind of wasn't. I did have those other issues that I had to deal with, but it did come back that I was sensitive, highly sensitive to soy, eggs, dairy, and gluten. And so here I am going, what do I eat? And I get the test results, hop on a plane, fly to Reno to visit my dad, like the same day. And I tell him about it. He said, "What can you eat?" And I said, "I have no idea, but I'll figure it out when I get home." And he goes, "No. Let's go to the grocery store. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on, see if we can find something for you to eat." So we walked that grocery store for 3 hours, and we're reading labels, and we find like two things: a package of crackers, which are very expensive and the worst tasting crackers I've ever had in my entire life. And I can't remember something else, but it was all very expensive and tasted bad. Now, this is before gluten-free was even a buzzword. And so it was pretty cliche, but we said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And so I started thinking, there's got to be something out there where I can say, "I want a cereal and I can't have soy. Now tell me what I can go get." Because what was out in the market currently was there was an app, you could scan barcodes, and it would say, "This item contains X, Y, and Z." Well, that doesn't help me if I want to go directly to the product that will work for me. The inverse needed to be invented, basically. And so I thought, well, why don't I start working on that? Because even if I can't market it, it's something that I could use. And so here I am, laid up for 30 days, trying to figure out if I'm going to have chemo, at a crossroads where I love the molecular biology. I love, the genetics that I'm learning, those classes. But I realized I don't want to spend the rest of my life in a lab. And I'm kind of having a kind of a issue with my conscience here, because I want to do something good to help people. I want to have purpose in my life. And so here I am thinking, well, maybe this is it. And so I decided that I was going to set out to do this. Here I am at this crossroads. I've kind of exited the legal career. I'm trying to figure out what direction I want to go. And so I said to myself, I'm going to do this. I made the decision. There were no two ways about it. I thought about it for quite a while, and I said, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. So I started figuring out, what's out there, what can be done. And I thought, there needs to be an app that can be on someone's phone, kind of the inverse of what was out there. And I thought, okay, I'm going to create a database. I'll have a website where, it will list out different foods that people can eat by allergen. And I'll reach out to manufacturers. I'll get top tier advertising for them. That's how I'll make money. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I figured out. And so the problem was I didn't know how to code, and I didn't have $100,000 to pay someone to do all of this. So again, being at this crossroads, I decide, okay, I'm just going to learn how to code. just going to figure it out. And I'm going to learn how to code to the point that I can build it to where I've got an MVP. And then hopefully I will make some money and I can hire someone that knows more than I do. But because I will be educated, I can sit across from them, I can ask them questions, and I'll know if they know what they claim to know. I didn't want to be BS'd, because I had already had an experience like that earlier with a project that I was working on. So I was like, okay, I only have to go through that lesson one time. So I set out to learn how to code, and that's what I did, and I really enjoyed it. I made some mistakes. I decided that I needed to build a website that would essentially launch rockets as opposed to an e-commerce website. So I try to counsel my clients on that now. You don't have to build out 20 rungs beyond where you are, maybe 3. And so I built a Magento website for a small e-commerce website, basically, which if you're in the e-commerce world, Magento for e-commerce is like, that's like as sophisticated as you get. I mean,
Right.
we don't even really
It's the
build
big
Magento
kahuna.
websites
Yeah.
anymore. But yeah, so anyway, so I set out to do that, and here I am working on it. As luck would have it, I actually learned how to code in the process of starting this company. Savings is starting to run out, so I was taking a couple classes at Johnson County Community College, and I went to one of my professors and I said, "Hey, I think I'm ready for client work. Do you know of anybody that needs a website built?" He said, "Yeah, actually I do." So he connected me with what would be my first client. And so she needed an e-commerce website. She's an artist. And so I met with her and, talked through with her, and she already had a site and she needed some adjustments. So, we sat down and chatted about it. And I realized I really liked that. I liked helping her understand what her options are, pros and cons to both, and then helping her, make that decision and then executing on it. I really enjoyed that process. And so what I found was, as I'm working on this passion project, I've developed a skill, and I accidentally, I guess, kind of created this other company, which is called Wise Webs, that I now run today. And I filtered, all of my web development projects through that. And one of my clients told me about the eScholars program at UMKC. And she said, "Hey, I think this program might actually help you grow your web development company." And I thought about it for a second, and I thought, well, that's great, but I don't really need help with that. I want to kind of get this other project going and get it off my plate so I can focus over here, or I want to see if there's something here. Because when I'm older, I don't want to have any regrets. I got to get this taken care of so that I don't have that issue when I'm older. I don't want to, I wonder what might have been. I kind of left out that also, as money was dwindling, in this process, I ended up getting a sales career. So I also did that too. I worked for a company that basically qualified patients to wear oxygen at night. And so what I did was I traveled around. I actually answered an ad on Craigslist, and I wanted a PUD job to make money. I didn't want to have anything in my head. I just wanted to check in, check out, and then get back to coding at night. And as luck would have it, I really hit it off with my boss, and she said, "Hey, you ever thought about a sales career?" My dad was always trying to get me into sales. And so I thought, well, I'm going to need that as I'm building this company. Not necessarily web development company, because I hadn't really done a whole lot of that yet. But with the other company, I'm gonna need that. And it was scary. I didn't want to do it. I had the preconceived notions that young people do about sales and salespeople. I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to do that. But I needed to eat my vegetables, so I said sure, even though I was scared about it. And so, here I am. I'm the only salesperson for the company. I have knowledge of the eastern part of the country because I used to live over there. So that was naturally kind of where a lot of, our potential accounts were, and some of our current accounts. So I had free reign. Didn't really have a whole lot of marketing support. I basically did cold calling, got people to get on a demo. And then if I needed to, I'd hop out there when I went to state association shows. So I was either cold calling and getting on demos in the office, or when I traveled, I was a road warrior. So I'd go in for a state association show. I'd go in a day or two early. I'd leave a day or two late, and I'd stack the deck. I'd say, "Hey, I'm headed out to Raleigh. I'm going to be in your area. I'd love to just come by and chat with you for a minute. Let me just show you about this thing we've got." And so I just stacked the deck with appointments all day long, to the point that, you hear some of the road warrior salespeople say, I wake up in a hotel room and I can't remember what city I'm in. I've done that.
Right.
Because it was just, that's how I'm wired. And so I got a lot of really good experience. That was when I learned that it's very difficult to make a behavioral sale. So for my clients, my customers, it didn't cost them a thing to use our software. We got paid through the insurance company, but we just needed them to use our software to run our tests and process our tests. So it didn't cost them a thing, but they had to change how they were doing what they were doing already. And so that was a really, really big learning experience for me that I've been able to carry on for the rest of my career. Is, the biggest competitor sometimes is just inertia. It's not necessarily, company X down the street. It's, I'm in the groove of doing what I'm already doing, and you want me to do something different. You need to understand me and my day and what I've got to get through. And you need to prove it to me that I'm going to reap more benefits by doing or using your product or service than continuing to do what I'm doing right now, because that costs me something. And so that was really an important lesson for me to learn.
Yeah.
And so so that was really great experience. But then I ended up leaving that job and kind of really putting more emphasis on growing this. First of all, I started Wise Website right after that, for some websites on the side. And then, going back to when one of my customers or clients said, hey, there's this e-scholars program. And so this e-scholars program, I thought, okay, fast, no, maybe there's something with this. I can't let it go. I gotta see it through. And you got to think, at this point, I've kind of been beat down a little bit. I've gone through, the sickness, the fear, getting through that, walking through that. I'm learning to code. You can conjure up in your mind all the generic stereotypes, or excuse me, all the stereotypes you want about coders. I did. I worked in the dark, round the clock, just sat there, Mountain Dew, Cheetos. Yeah, that was me. And so I'm a little bit of a recluse. I've been beat down. I'm working around the clock, and I remember I filled out the application. I really wanted them to pick me. I really wanted to get picked. And they selected me for this program. And the very first day, it was a Saturday morning, I'm at UMKC, I sit in the back, and people are starting to fill in, and they're starting to do introductions. And I remember looking around and thinking, wow, I've found my people. And it's like I went from this, kind of internal, kind of going through this rough spot in my life, to feeling like nobody understood. Here I'm trying to start this business. It's hard. It's difficult. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, but it's just, nobody really gets that, Then I go to sitting in a room full of people that are doing the same thing. And it's like, those guys over there are starting a brewery, and I don't care about that. And this person over here is starting this, doing this product over here, and I don't really care about that. But what I do care about is the fact that they are all so committed to what is so personally, important to them and what's driving them. And I was just like, wow, I found my people. It was so great. And, I took that opportunity and I ran with it. And I was able to launch the company. It was called Great Box, GR8BOX. Foods free, the top 8 allergens. And I remember thinking, okay, I've got to kind of resurrect this idea a little bit. Originally, it's going to be a website that had top tier advertising for manufacturers, get products in front of people. And as luck would have it, this is around the subscription box boom. And I'm thinking to myself, how do I get lots of product in front of people? Because access is difficult. That's kind of a challenge. And how do I get a lot of awareness? How do I cross all of those things? And I remember thinking to myself, oh man, I created another subscription box. That's really what I did. And so I ended up launching it, had some success. I will say marginal success, but I got it off the ground, and that was a huge accomplishment for me. And so here I am running Wise Webs, and I'm getting clients there. That's actually surprisingly going well for the amount of time I was spending on it. And I've got this subscription box company. I've got packaging, I've got manufacturer relationships, and I'm trying to run both of them at the same time. And so I eventually had to, feed one or losing both. And so I decided that this was really where my passion was, because I really like sitting down with clients and helping them understand, first of all, that there was someone in technology that they could trust that wasn't going to take advantage of the fact that maybe they didn't have limited technology experience, would help them understand the landscape of possibilities that was right for them and their business. And then I could help them understand the implications of each of those decisions. We make a decision together and then we'd implement it. And then the overarching goal is really just to help them grow their business. And so I really, really, really enjoyed that. But on the Great Box project, I learned some things that really helped me along the way. For anyone that's starting a business, there's that period of, I got to do all these things and then I get overwhelmed. And what do I do? And what's the prioritization? How do I do that? And one of the things that really helped me was I kind of just did that brain dump. I took all the things that were in my head and I made a vertical list, one item on each line. And I did that until I couldn't think of anything else I needed to get out. So now that fear of forgetting something or, not doing something is off because it's on paper. And then I started going through that list and I started thinking through each of them. And I thought, wow, this thing is naturally prioritizing itself. Because one of the things on my list was I needed to reach out to different manufacturers and develop relationships and get them to give me free product. I needed those marketing samples in my box and then allow me to do that for me to essentially to have a product. And so as I'm doing my 360-degree thinking around that scenario, I'm envisioning them responding to me and how am I being perceived? And I'm thinking, what's the first thing they're going to do when I call if I can get their attention? Well, they're probably going to Google me or try to look up a website to see if I'm legit. Here I am calling and asking for something. So that meant that the website needed to move up on the list before I reached out to manufacturers to show that I was legit. And I just did that with the entire list with everything. And it naturally prioritized everything for me.
Terri, there's so many things I want to talk about we'll get to everything. But so talk about what do you think drove the fear early on that you didn't want to make a wrong decision on choosing a career path? What do you think drove that?
I'm older now, so I think I understand myself a little bit better. I think there's a little bit of perfectionism in me. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So I want to do it right. I want to get it right. But, going back to that dinner table talk, I think my dad was always bored in his career. He needed a challenge. And he's a very logical, very sequential person. He thinks, there's the obvious stuff first, take care of that stuff. And then there's the next stuff and then the next stuff. I mean, he's a great businessman. I think seeing him get bored with his career, that probably, subconsciously kind of seeped in, for me. But I also knew that I just wanted to make a difference and I didn't want to go in the wrong direction. That was so important to me. But I think kind of the other thing I was striving for security. I was striving for security for myself. And that doesn't necessarily mean financial. I wanted to be secure in who I am. I wanted to be secure in the direction. I wanted to be secure in the impact I was making. That was the driving force for me.
You remind me a little bit of Bill Belichick. So, obviously the great Patriots coach. But because Belichick started his career, he was a second or third string tight end in college, not a major college, but he wanted to be a coach and he did anything. When he originally started, and I can't remember where he started, it was some college somewhere. He was like washing the uniforms, getting towel. Like he started on the bottom rung and he would do anything to learn. And when you talk about, kind of your legal career and how you, kind of just wanted to learn and your initiative, you just wanted to, and, that's really having the long game in mind, which in your, early 20s, that's, supposedly your brain doesn't fully develop till you're 25, Probably for males, it's longer than that, but but you know, like you really understood that, hey, I want to learn this, and I'm willing to start here, which is incredible. I mean, I mean, because I mean, where'd you get that mentality?
If I'm really honest with you, I obviously I did want to look at that other position. It was an educational fact finding kind of mission. But at the same time, the risk factor there was very low. I could get into an area that I desired, that I thought was important to me. Because I'm trying to go on this discovery, and I get asked for the bottom of the barrel of jobs, and I'm not above anything. I'll do anything to get that experience. And so the risk that I was taking in terms of, can I do this? Can I get this? Was pretty low. I was kind of going for that sure bet. The other thing is, as you get older, you also start to learn what your superpowers are. And my superpower is, I'm a big observer. I can be in a room and I can know what's going on around the corner. I mean, I know, I use my senses, and I absorb. And so that was a way that I could learn a lot, was that hands-on. I felt like, there's people, oh, I'm going to go get a job doing that, and I'll get the experience, or I'm going to take a class on that and I'll learn the experience. I felt like I soaked up every ounce of possibility of learning in each of those little jobs. And it's interesting now, as an entrepreneur, that, it wasn't just, oh, I got a load of experience doing that in the legal field, and I got a little experience doing that. I had no idea how I would go to set myself up to be an entrepreneur, by getting all the different, tastes of different areas of skills that I would need. And even if it was just to go on to be set up to hire the right people, or to know the right questions to ask, or to figure out, can I do this? Do I want to do this? Or do I want to hire this out? So I had enough experience in a lot of different areas that, that really helped me out.
Yeah, the other thing too is, again, your career journey is phenomenal, but then you get, self, proclaimed recluse.
Mm.
Put me in the dark room. I'll code,
Yeah,
Cheetos, I'll
sure.
do all good. Um, Red Bull probably wasn't invented, or maybe it was. I don't know. Anyhow, then you're in sales. So what was your
Mm.
kind of, obviously you're, you have a learner mentality, which is phenomenal, but who were your sales mentors, whether they be people you knew, or, just
Yeah.
read about, or, how did you embrace learning about, hey, how do I sell things to people?
Yeah. Well, I leaned on my dad a lot. You know, um, I chatted with him about it, and that's something he and I have in common. We can sit and talk about business for hours. He gave me some advice along the way. I mean, I did ask my boss a lot of questions, although I didn't really get any formal training. It was, pick up the phone as many times as you possibly can in an hour, and keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. I knew that I wanted to be kind to the business and her business. So when I flew to a particular area, I was going to make every single, I was going to take every single opportunity I had, like by stacking the deck, beating myself to death, trying to basically make use of every dollar that was being spent on that business trip. So it was just, that was just kind of my nature, to just, first of all, be empathetic to others. That, I think that's also my nature. And that's a lot of, I mean, not to say that my dad's not empathetic, but that's a lot of my mom too. I'm a pretty good blend of, I think, probably both of my parents. But my mom's very empathetic. Mom's a teacher. She's very kind, very giving. And so I think, again, observing and watching that, you always want to be kind to people. And I think as I started getting into sales, it's, as I'm observing, I'm learning real time. And, one experience educates me for the next experience and the next experience. And I keep getting better and better and better. But I remember my very first sales call. I was driving to Omaha, rented a car, getting ready to drive to Omaha. I am scared out of my mind. And I'm thinking, as I'm getting close, it's a hospital system. that I was going to. And I talked to the guy on the phone. We did the demo. He was looking forward for me coming out. We set an appointment. But I'm still thinking, they're going to kick me out. Everybody hates salespeople. They're going to kick me out. And I'm just really kind of stressing myself out as I'm getting there. And I'm sitting in the car and I'm just kind of thinking through this situation. And again, that 360-degree thinking around the situation. And I'm thinking, he gave me the address. He wants me to show up. And so I thought, okay, and I want to keep my job. So I'm going to get up. I'm going to get out of the car. I'm going to go have this meeting. I walk through the front door and I'm polite. I'm kind. I go into the boardroom and, in my mind, in my memory, it's so much different than I'm sure reality. Because in my mind, it was a very dark boardroom. There was one hanging light that was just swinging just a little. And there was a big ticking clock. Those were the things that I remember. And, I thought, I don't even know what to ask this guy, or I don't even know what to say. And when I thought, I don't know what to say, then I heard this internal voice. And my dad always calls it this internal indicator. It tells you what's right and wrong. But I heard this little voice say, if you don't know what to say, then maybe you ought to listen. And I heard that like as clear as could be. And so then I started asking him. I said, well, tell me about how's business. And I just started getting him talking. And then naturally, now that I've understood a little bit more about his business, then I was able to help him understand how what I had to offer could complement what he's doing, solve a few problems, and make his life a little bit easier. Because we did have some cutting edge technology at the time that our competitors didn't. And I was able to help him understand how a partnership with me and my company could benefit. And one of the best pieces of information from a sales perspective that my dad ever gave me was, don't ever sell. Don't ever sell. You just tell them about it. And that helped me be more okay. Oh, okay, well, I don't have to be that salesy person that no one likes. I can be empathetic. I can understand my prospect and the customer. I can understand what their needs are. And then I can help them understand how a partnership with me could be beneficial to them. And it's okay if it's not. If it's not, better to know now and not engage and not have a partnership and let them go on and partner with someone that can help them maybe better than I can. And I have no qualms with that. And I don't want to put myself through that. Easy come, easy go.
Right.
I'm interested in sustaining long-term relationships where I get to play to my strengths and I'm able to help grow their business.
Yeah, no, you can't sell to 100% of the people you talk to, right? It's just not possible.
Absolutely.
And you want the customers and clients that are best for you, right? That are best fit. So Terri, you seem like a very disciplined person. Do you have any daily routines that you go through?
I will tell you that that's actually something I'm working on right now. I've had some transitions in my life right now, moving, again, being sick for several weeks. I'm trying to reestablish my daily routine. So I'm trying to get a little bit more balance. For me, I think for years I fought it. I didn't want to be someone who had that rigid routine. I saw that as kind of, I just don't want to be that person. Well, I know my life goes a lot better when I've got routine, I've got discipline, I've got structure. One thing I used to do before I moved was I would wake up in the morning, I drink 20 ounces of water just to kind of flush my system. And I'd do that standing right at the kitchen counter, 20 ounces of water. And then I'd go for a 30 to 45-minute walk. And then on my way back, I'd get a cup of coffee and then start my day once I got back home. And that was a really good routine for me. Simple, but it was something that I did for me. And part of the reason why I started doing that, and I also try to work out, eat right, things like that. But part of the reason why I did that and I referenced that is right before that time period of where I put that specific routine in place, I had worked around the clock. I had gotten mono as an adult, which I don't recommend for anybody. I've never been the same because I had it in high school, no symptoms. In 2017, I got it. And it was pretty rough. I get tired easier, that kind of thing. So I'm just now starting to feel like more like my old self. But it was from, I think, 1 week I got 3.5 hours of sleep, an entire week. I was launching a new company. I was trying to run the other one. I didn't want to, lose momentum. I got people I don't want to let down. And I learned a huge lesson. You can't humanly do that. You shouldn't do that to yourself. But I got a lot of old school business mentality in my head. And I have to be careful about that because you make whatever sacrifices you got to make to get the job done. There's no excuses. You do it, you walk through it, you get it done. And I've had to evolve. That is not who we are as a society anymore. And I don't have to kill myself to make things happen. It's more important to me to have balance in my life and take care of myself and grow my business. That doesn't mean I let things suffer. I can't do that. But that means that the challenge is put upon me to get that balance. And I got to figure out how to do that. And some days are going to be better than others, but you have a bad day, you have a better day the next day. So that balance is really important to me. And I'm glad you brought that up, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all works in progress for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wise Webs, you started in 2015. Tell the audience how it's evolved, right? So you started doing web development, and where are you today? And what how's the focus changed?
Yeah, so it has evolved and it has changed quite a bit. So like you said, started out as a web development company, and we chatted about that a little earlier. I will say one thing that has not changed is I think the business mentality has always been the same. I don't care if I ever build another website. I don't care if I ever take on another strategy project. If I can't sit down with my client and help them understand the landscape might be a little bit wider than they probably thought, and sit down and help them understand the implications of going down each of those paths, empower them to make the decision that's right for them, support them, walk through that with them, and help them grow their business. That is what gets me up out of bed every day. That's what I enjoy. That's my passion. I love that. How the business has evolved went from pretty much straight up technology, even though the goal was always to help the business grow through websites, maybe a little bit of creative. Now it's evolved to on the technology side where we build custom technology for restaurants. We have a product called Curbside Manager. I love a name that tells you what it is. It helps you manage your curbside orders really internally in the restaurant. It will communicate with the guest and let them know where things are in terms of the order process, but it helps the internal staff manage those orders a little bit better and kind of keep those orders flowing. And that came out of a really great relationship that I've had with the clients over the years, and they made me feel really good, called me up and said, "We've got this problem. What do you think we ought to do?" I said, "Well, I don't have any business give me any suggestions until I come out and observe." Did that, and then together we came up with an idea and built it, and so now we've got this new product. So that's on the technology side. We do a ton of strategy. It doesn't even have to have anything to do with technology. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But in terms of strategy, we typically go through the marketing door. Is a company positioned correctly to set themselves up for success, to resonate with their best customers? So a lot of different strategies. To the point that I would say probably 75% of what we do. It fluctuates. Maybe 65% of what we do is just straight up strategy. We've been very fortunate that we've actually had some international companies that have hired us multiple times. Me taking on that first web development project to where we are now, it's been a huge journey. It's been a really long journey, and we still have a long way to go, but I'm so grateful. I find it a huge, huge, huge honor when someone invites me into their business. I don't take that lightly. And I now have a business partner, started partnering with a business partner, and I think we kind of made it official in 2017, but we met in 2016. And I started hiring him to partner up with me on some jobs, and he would hire me to partner up on some jobs. And so now, if we're just talking about strategy assignments, it's so interesting that his mind works so differently than mine. But when we're in what we call a whiteboard strategy session, which is what we do for prospects, potential clients, where we're just getting to know, what their business is like and what the issue is. And it's usually some kind of, for some reason, growth's kind of stalled out. So we have a kind of a discovery meeting where we whiteboard everything, and they can get all that stuff that's in their head out on the whiteboard. And we can learn about them, they can learn about us. But the really cool part is, I'd say within about 30 minutes, I know what the answer is. And my business partner knows what the answer is. We just know. But the difference is how he sees the path to get there is going to be very different than how I see the path to get there. And so then we come together and we get the right path for the client. And that's the really cool part, is just his brain, it works differently. His experience is different than mine. I think very much in patterns. I like operations. I genuinely like 1, 2, and then 3 to come next. I'm that kind of a person. And, he just thinks through things just a little bit differently than I do. And he's got a lot of experience that I don't have. That was one thing that I would have never thought that I would have a business partner. But I also recognized in him the wealth of experience and knowledge that he has. And if I set out to go get that experience I need 2 lifetimes to do that. So getting access to that experience through a partnership made sense. And so that's also really helped me grow and kind of pivot the company just a little bit. But the one thing that we both had in common, like going back to, the tools we use, we don't really care about what it is we do as long as we're helping our clients grow. And that has never wavered.
Terri, there's 2 groups of people I love to help with advice from great leaders like yourself. The first group is a recent college graduate as they're going out in the world trying to get that first professional job. What advice would you have for them to start their career search, get their first job?
I would say, first of all, don't be afraid to make a mistake. You should be so lucky to have pivots and turns and a windy road in your career, because first of all, that's what makes it interesting. And I had the mentality of kind of that old school mentality of you're going to get a corporate job, you're going to stay there the rest of your life. When I entered the working world, just on the tail end of that. And so I would say, don't be afraid to try new things, and to not feel as though if you take this job, you're going to be there for the rest of your life. Understand what you might be able to glean from that job and embrace it. So I think that's the thing. Usually whenever I speak to college classes, that's the one thing I want them to know, is that I didn't know what I wanted to do, and that was okay. And I was scared that I was going to be bored, and that's okay. But try to choose something that interests you, and just know that, observe and learn, and you just keep doing that. Don't stop doing that.
Yeah, the second group is, you get a job out of college and you're an individual contributor, I'll say probably close to 99% of the time. But then you get that first leadership role where, officially, formally, you're a manager and you have people you're responsible for now. So for those type people, what advice do you have for them as they start their leadership journey?
I'd say it's probably 2 things. And I'm sure you probably hear this a lot, Jeff, but communication is huge. Don't make assumptions. It's okay to over communicate. Even in my partnership, I feel like I made some assumptions that probably weren't communicated. And so I think that communication is really important. But then I also think consistency is really important too. When you're managing people, they need to know what they can expect from you, and you need to be consistent. It's okay to make changes. That's okay. But across the board, you need to create a consistent, stable environment for them. And because as they are learning, they got to have something that's foundational for them. And creating a consistent environment with, the appropriate level of communication, I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, great advice. Terri, you've been so great to talk to. I really, I've interviewed easily over 50 leaders, and I love your career journey. I love how you navigated it. I love how you just embraced, starting on the bottom rung to learn and just to get in, and your, long game mentality. So thank you so much for being on the corporate couch today.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I mean, some big deal for me to be included in this company. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, you're very well spoken, and have a great Friday.
You too. Thanks, Jeff.
God, I love talking to Terri. I mean, geez, all the stuff she had to overcome, and there's so many different things I could talk about with her, and just the obstacles, and but what I loved about her, she's like the Bill Belichick of CEOs. Belichick started his coaching career. He was a average kind of probably Division III tight end / center from some unrecognizable college in Connecticut. Goes to work. So his first job is for the Baltimore Colts, and he gets the job for $25 a week with working for Ted Marchibroda, who was the head coach of the Colts at that time. And it's $25 a week, and he's basically the equipment manager. He's not doing any coaching. And that was Terri's philosophy. Like, I'm going to start at the lowest rung of a company, whether that's a legal assistant, or working at I forget, some of the tech space, sales. I'm going to learn from the bottom up, so I understand kind of the whole, from the learning. She had the long game in mind, so I just thought that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you take out of it, Joe?
I almost the same thing. The funny thing was that was her philosophy on wondering whether or not she even wanted to get a job in a particular industry. She worked in so many different industries, and she had this fear. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
What was it?
Earlier in her career, she had a fear of picking the wrong career.
That's what it was.
I'm going to say deathly afraid, but I mean, she mentioned it several times during the course of the conversation. But she was like, I'm afraid, so I'm going to start low and to see what it's like.
Just to see if I want to even work there, right? And so I'm going to start out in the mailroom. I'm going to start out in the cafeteria. I'm going to start out as a marketing assistant or an intern or whatever it is in an industry that you know nothing about.
Right.
And I think one of the things that is significant for are people that are just coming out of college with a new degree. You're always talking about people like that and wondering how are they going to get a job. The first thing that they ought to do then is to get a job, but don't get the job that you want. Get a job that gets you into the industry that you want to be in, because young graduates, your first job will not be the job that you want.
Right.
It
might, but you'll be a big outlier.
Yeah, right. But let's just assume that it won't be the first job. The first job that you get will not be the first job, or will not be the ultimate job that you want, or the ultimate job that you end up with.
Exactly.
But get in that industry or get in that company. So if you think that you want to work in the XYZ industry or the ABC company or corporation or something like that, get a job there, wash dishes, sweep the floors, clean the toilets, do whatever it takes in that industry to make the connections, to learn about that industry, to figure out whether or not that's a good fit for you. And eventually your time will come. And guess what? It may not ultimately be in that industry, and it may not ultimately be in that company. Obviously, I'm not in the industry that I started out in, and I'm not matter of fact, I'm not even in an industry that even existed hardly.
Right.
When I started, right? There was no such thing as the data analytics that I do for a living, or did for a living. That didn't even exist when I did my first job search.
Yeah.
So come into it with that kind of expectation. Don't come into it thinking that somebody is going to take a 22-year-old college graduate, fresh out of school, and give him a six-figure income and make him a senior executive in an industry that he has absolutely no experience in. That just is not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we didn't even talk about, I mean, Terri started her first business, 16, Terri Jordan Photography, and just numerous, all to solve problems and all to learn. It was just a fascinating conversation. Terri is just so great. Any leadership advice you have for our great listeners today, Joe?
We are going to go to that great philosopher Calvin one more time, who was talking to his pet stuffed tiger Hobbes. And one time he said, school wouldn't be so bad if you didn't have to go every day, and if you didn't have to learn anything, and if you took away all the teachers and took away all the other kids, and it was completely different, school would be great. Nobody asked me how things ought to be. I've got tons of ideas.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.